Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week I'm going to be focusing on spin-off groups, otherwise known as splinter groups. These are groups that have spun off or splintered from another group. That's either because the first band broke up or one or more of the members of that band went off to do their own thing. I'll be bringing you some punk, some post-punk, some new wave, and some things I can't even define. So please join me for a heaping helping of spin-off groups. At this point, I just want to thank my latest patron. Thank you, David. I hope you and Paula are enjoying all the episodes. If any of you are enjoying the content so much that you want access to full episodes, please visit patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thanks. I came up with the idea for this episode when I was doing the last episode, which was on cover songs, and I featured Fine Young Cannibals, who used to be in the English Beat. And so I thought it would be cool to bring you a whole slew of bands that spun off from other bands and to talk a little bit about my favorite album by them. And speaking of the English Beat, why don't we begin with one of my favorite 80s bands ever, General Public, and their album, All the Rage. This was the band's debut album, which came out in 1984 on my beloved IRS Records. When the Beat broke up, its two lead vocalists, Dave Wakeling and Ranking Roger, formed General Public, which put out possibly the greatest 80s song ever in Tenderness, which is on this album. All the Rage was one of those albums that I truly devoured from front to back, and I know every song on this LP by heart. Side 1 is a perfect side of music. Let's just get that right out of the way. Hot You're Cool, Tenderness, Anxious, Never You've Done That, Burning Bright, they are all killer tracks. And side 2's Are You Leading Me On is a top 3 General Public track for me. But are you leading me on, or is there something behind it? I don't know, but I mean to find out. Is there something you're hiding? Those are great lyrics, super specific, yet vague enough to allow you to fill in the blanks. There's honestly not an uninspired song on this album. If you're under the impression that this band was a one-hit wonder, you are sadly mistaken, and I highly recommend you pick up All the Rage. One thing easily forgotten about this LP was that an original member of General Public was Mick Jones, and he plays guitar on several tracks on this album. Before the band were finished recording the album, however, Mick had already left to form Big Audio Dynamite. Speaking of which, Big Audio Dynamite. This is Number 10 Upping Street, which is of course a play on Number 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister lives. This is the band's second album, which was released in 1986. I was a very big fan of their debut album, which is excellent, and I highly recommend it, especially the tracks E=MC² and Medicine Show. However, their sophomore album is my favorite album by them. This is the band formed by Mick Jones of The Clash with his friend, the legendary DJ Don Letts, represented here, and it is a stunner of an album. You're probably not going to believe me, but they looked really cool way back then. In '86, that was a clean look, my friend. The secret sauce on this album are the songs written by Mick Jones and Joe Strummer. They're first written together since the Clash demise, and the two former bandmates produced this LP together. Joe Strummer provided lyrics on several songs, including 3 tracks, Beyond the Pale, Limbo the Law, and V13, which not coincidentally are the best tracks on the album. When people say they're curious about what the Clash would have sounded like had they stayed together, I don't play them any Joe Strummer solo stuff. I play them this album. Aside from Joe's involvement, Mick Jones and Don Letts created Come On Every Beatbox, which is another album highlight. Rounded out with fun, whimsical tracks such as Ticket and Dial a Hitman, which features Matt Dillon and Larry Fishburne. There's a lot more than meets the eye about this eclectic album. Up next, Jaguar Love, Take Me to the Sea. This is the splinter group that was formed out of the Blood Brothers, featuring that band's bassist, Cody Vodolato, and their co-lead vocalist, Johnny Whitney. Johnny was my favorite member of Blood Brothers. He was the little cute blonde guy with the high voice with the serrated edge that cut easily through even their most dissonant instrumentation. This is Jaguar Love's debut LP, Take Me to the Sea, which came out on Matador Records in 2008. And my favorite songs on this album are Side 1. I'm kidding. Sort of. Side 1 is power-packed with great songs such as Highways of Gold, Bats Over the Pacific Ocean, Jaguar Pirates, Georgia, Vagabond Ballroom, one song better than the last. Seriously, listen to side 1 of this LP, and it's soulful, destructo punk, and tell me if you aren't hooked. This is definitely the ideal band for anyone who enjoyed the Blood Brothers, but really wished that they'd sand down some of their more jagged edges. Now don't get me wrong, I love the Blood Brothers' Burn Piano Island Burn and Young Machetes. So you gotta believe me when I say that I enjoyed Jaguar Love's full-length LP even more than any Blood Brothers album. Don't at me. You know what? Go ahead, at me. If you saw my best 20 albums of the last 20 years episode, you know how much I love Title Fight. Their album Floral Green was my favorite album of 2008. So it probably won't surprise you that Litterer Life is Not a Lesson, the spin-off project by their lead vocalist and bass player Ned Russin, was my favorite 2021 release. This was released on Anti, which is a subsidiary of Epitaph. Ned wrote, produced, and played everything on most of this album, except for drums provided by his brother and Title Fight bandmate Ben. Recorded between March and May of 2020. I can't think of a song I don't like on this LP. And I have to say that Ned totally won the lockdown. And I should know because I started this channel during the lockdown, so I wouldn't lose my mind. I ended up losing my mind anyway, but that's another story. Here's a bold statement. I love this album even more than Floral Green. Whereas that album was an all-out sonic assault. This album's spacious production, guitar fuzz backdrop, and synth sweetening lend even more weight to Ben's vocals. And the result is an album that packs an even bigger emotional punch. Far more experimental than anything he did in Title Fight. This has a little of that deluxe folk implosion production of the mid-90s, where there aren't things you haven't heard before, but the way that it's presented totally elevates the material. It's very eclectic, very shoegaze friendly, and it's got a little dash of the Rentals in it, which I really love. Listen to the tracks Bodies, Are You Sure, and Indeed, and you tell me if this isn't the best indie rock record of 2021. Up next, The Breeders, Pod. This is my original US pressing on 4AD Records. I'm mentioning this album after Glitterer because both bands' gritty yet beautiful sounds blend well together. This album, The Breeders' debut, produced by Steve Albini, is a study in minimalism, as it doesn't so much sound recorded as it does captured. You can hear the studio ambiance in the lo-fi, off-the-cuff renditions that wound up on the album. This was, of course, Kim Deal's band, concurrent with, and after she left, the Pixies. Kim was joined in The Breeders by Tanya Donnelly, formerly of Throwing Muses, Josephine Wiggs on bass, and drummer Britt Walford from the band Slint, who used a couple of pseudonyms during his times with the band, including Shannon Doughton and Mike Hunt. Now say it fast. I bought this album when it came out. I was a rabid Pixies fan in 1990, and I had heard Kim was working on a solo album, but it was only after I saw the video for the song Hellbound on MTV's 120 Minutes that I knew I had to get this album. The song reminded me of everything I love about Kim Deal's voice. It's a voice both childlike and world-weary at the same time. People more familiar with the Breeders' later work might be taken aback by these stark, off-kilter songs on this LP. It's only on the song Fortunately Gone that you can hear the more radio-friendly sound the band would eventually achieve on their breakthrough album Last Splash. Tanya Donnelly, of course, would also find later breakthrough success with her band Belly. My favorite moments on this LP are the songs Hellbound, Opened, Limehouse, and the band's exceptional cover of the Beatles' Happiness is a Warm Gun. Why didn't I include that song in my Kick-Ass Covers episode? Probably because I knew I was doing this episode. To see the rest of this week's episode, please join my Patreon at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard.